How we got our Bible, part 2. Now, the Apocrypha has been shrouded in controversy from day one, basically because of what I told you now, that when the Hebrews went into diaspora, were conquered and taken to other nations, there was a belief that God was not speaking to them again, that the sacred book of the Jews, that is the Hagiographa, has been lost. So some people took it upon themselves to write again, according to their memory, what they believe is what God has told Moses. Some did not go that way. Some believed that God was speaking to them, and some wrote just history. So that was why the Apocrypha were shrouded in mystery. So the rabbinical sect in those periods refused to accept the Apocrypha, just like they had issues with the Samaritans. They refused to accept the Apocrypha. They stuck with the Hagiograph, which was in the custody of the rabbi. Now, don't forget, as of this stage, this sacred book were still in scroll forms. They have not been put together into one single book. They were all scrolls, although some were accepted, they were not accepted. Now, so we have 3 sacred books now. For those who are following me, we have what we call the Hagiographa, that is the old Hebrew sacred book that contains the writings of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And then the great prophet like Isaiah was highly respected. Jeremiah was also, though there were a little bit of controversy about some of the books of Jeremiah. And then the wisdom books, that is most Psalm, Proverbs, etc., etc. Now, when they went into the diaspora, they had to translate them into the layman's language of the day, which was what we call the Septuagint, that is the Hagiograph in Greek. However, don't forget I told you that there was a little bit of reservation in the Hagiographa, which was lost in the Septuagint. All right. Now, later, after the collapse of the city and then the Jerusalem was burned down, many years later, some people took it upon themselves to rewrite what they believe had been lost, or to recount their own spiritual experience, which formed the bulk of what we call the Apocrypha. All right, that was the state of things until we get to what we call the New Testament. Now, it is important I add this, that what we call the Old Testament and the New Testament is not actually one testament is old and one testament is new, just like we see today. When you look at the Bible today, now you say, oh, Old Testament, oh, New Testament. It's not because we were saying one as old or one as new. It was just a way of differentiating the writings that came later, after the Hagiographa was compiled. You understand? It was the writings that came. So in a bit for theologians to separate the old writings before the time of Jesus and after the time of Jesus, the theologians designate one as the Old Testament and then the new one as the New Testament, not because of Jesus Christ came and all those like we Christians today think. Now, all these things were done much later after Jesus Christ had come and gone, and most of the apostles were dead. Now, this was the state of things when Jesus Christ came. That is, we have the Hagiographa, we have the Septuagint, and then we have the Apocrypha. Now, when Jesus Christ quoted, he wasn't quoting from what we call the Bible today. He was quoting majorly from the Hagiographa, which most of the Jews know about. There were some quotation by the apostles from the Septuagint. Okay? Now, when Jesus Christ said, have you not read in the scripture simply means the writings. They were not called Hagiographa. The Hagiographa is just a designation by theologians. They were not called Biblios or Biblica, which is actually a Latin word, came much later. So Jesus Christ referred to the writings, what we call the Hagiographa. Jesus Christ referred to them as the scriptures, which means the writings of the prophets, the writings of Moses, etc., etc., the writings. So when you say, have you not read in the scriptures, it's actually saying, have you not read in the writings, which we today now will refer to the Hagiographa. That is the sacred books of the Jews prior to the time of the New Testament. It is interesting to note that during the time of the apostles, during the time of Jesus Christ, there were no written records. As a matter of fact, it was after Jesus Christ had gone and some of these apostles were getting old that they began to compile, based on one-on-one experience, what we're now known as the New Testament. The truth is that during the time of the New Testament, during the time of Jesus Christ, there was no sacredness to what we call the New Testament today. It was much, much later in the 15th centuries that some of these books were now canonized. That is, they were now given their respective place with equality with the Old Testament, that is the book of the hagiographer. So in the time of in the time of Jesus Christ, there was nothing like the book of Matthew. There was nothing like the book of the epistle. No. These were also shrouded in its own controversies, because the most authentic book, according to theologians, were the first 4 books. In fact, the first 3 books of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John was shrouded in a lot of controversy, because the reason for this controversy is that the authors were not really there were some of them were unknown. Sometimes some of these authors attributed their writings to a particular known name, but when you read through the writings, what they were writing is different from the character of the name associated with the book. So it was much later, after the sitting of the council, several councils, that they began to canonize some of these writings. Even after the canonization, some of these books were still held in controversy. For example, some of the epistles of Peter, James, Jude, and John were believed to not have been written by Peter, and the names associated with them. All right, so much later, between 395 AD and 4041 or thereabout AD, we have a book that was written by a man called Jerome. This was the first attempt to put together what we call the Bible today. That's a man called Jerome. And as of the time Jerome was doing his work, Greek had given way to Latin. And so the book was, the first attempt to compile the Bible into a single book was done in Latin. And that effort is called the Vulgate Bible. So the Vulgate Bible is the first attempt to put the Bible together as one book. Now, the Septuagint has the extended version and then the normal version. The extended version has to include the Apocrypha because of some political reason which is beyond our discussion. Now, this Vulgate